A young mother screamed inside the hospital. "My baby! Please, bring me my daughter." But the nurse only lowered her head. "I'm sorry. Your baby didn't survive." Grace's world collapsed. She held the tiny pink blanket she had prepared for 9 months. And cried until she had no tears left. Standing quietly outside the hospital room. Her cousin smiled. Because the baby hadn't died. She had stolen her. 20 years later. During a nationally televised charity gala. A successful young woman stepped onto the stage to receive an award. Grace froze. Around the young woman's wrist was a tiny silver bracelet engraved with 2 words. Forever loved. It was the bracelet Grace had placed on her newborn daughter. Moments before she disappeared. Then the host announced a surprise live DNA test. And seconds later, the giant screen displayed the impossible truth. The entire audience stood in shock. Because the woman who stole the baby was sitting in the front row. Grace Williams believed miracles came to people who refused to lose hope. For 7 long years. She prayed. She cried. She watched other women become mothers while her own nursery remained empty. People whispered behind her back. Maybe God forgot her. Maybe she'll never have children. Every cruel word broke her heart. But her husband, Samuel, never stopped believing. One quiet evening, he held Grace's trembling hands and smiled. "I don't care if it takes 1 year. Or 10. I married you. Not the dream of having children." Grace burst into tears. She had married the right man. Months later, everything changed. Grace stared at the pregnancy test in complete disbelief. Positive. She checked again. Positive. Again. Positive. She laughed. She cried. She fell onto her knees thanking God. Samuel rushed into the bathroom. What happened? Grace couldn't speak. She simply handed him the test. He looked at it. Then hugged her so tightly she could barely breathe. "We are going to be parents." That night, their tiny home became filled with laughter for the first time in years. 9 months passed like a beautiful dream. Samuel painted the nursery soft pink. Grace knitted tiny sweaters by hand. Every evening, she gently spoke to the baby growing inside her. "I can't wait to meet you. You'll always be loved." But not everyone celebrated their happiness. Grace's cousin, Vanessa Johnson, was watching. Vanessa was 26. Beautiful. Stylish. Always dressed in expensive clothes. But almost everything she owned had been bought with borrowed money. Behind her glamorous appearance, she was drowning in debt. Luxury handbags. Designer shoes. Credit cards. Fake success. She constantly compared herself to Grace. Why does she always get everything? The loving husband. The peaceful home. And now, a baby. The jealousy slowly consumed her. One afternoon, Vanessa visited Grace. Grace happily showed her the baby's nursery. Tiny shoes. Tiny blankets. Tiny stuffed animals. Vanessa forced a smile. It's beautiful. But inside, she hated every second. As she walked past the crib, her eyes landed on a tiny silver bracelet. Grace picked it up carefully. "My grandmother gave me this. It belonged to every first daughter in our family." She smiled lovingly. "The day my baby is born, I'm putting this on her wrist." The bracelet glittered beneath the sunlight. Engraved on the inside were 2 tiny words. Forever loved. Vanessa quietly memorized them. That night, she couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling. Then slowly whispered, Why should Grace have everything? Why not me? The thought frightened even her. But instead of rejecting it, she fed it. Over the following weeks, Vanessa secretly began visiting the hospital. She introduced herself to one of the night nurses, a woman named Lydia. Lydia had worked there for nearly 25 years. She was kind, hardworking, but her husband desperately needed expensive heart surgery. The hospital salary wasn't enough. Vanessa discovered everything. One afternoon, she placed a thick envelope on Lydia's table. Inside, more money than Lydia earned in 2 years. Lydia looked horrified. I can't accept this. Vanessa leaned closer. You don't have to hurt anyone. I only need one small favor. Lydia stood up immediately. No. Vanessa calmly replied. Think about your husband. Think about his operation. Lydia looked away. Her hands trembled. Vanessa quietly added another envelope. The temptation became unbearable. Days later, Grace went into labor. Someone rushed her to the hospital just before sunrise. After 16 exhausting hours, a beautiful baby girl entered the world. Her first cry echoed through the delivery room. Grace cried even harder. My daughter. Samoa kissed Grace's forehead. She's perfect. The nurse gently placed the tiny baby into Grace's arms. Grace smiled through her tears. With shaking fingers, she fastened the little silver bracelet around the baby's tiny wrist. Forever loved. My little angel. I'll never let anything happen to you. Outside the room, Vanessa watched everything. She had timed it perfectly. That night, Samoa finally went home for a few hours to collect fresh clothes. Grace fell asleep from exhaustion. The maternity ward became quiet. Lydia slowly entered the room. She looked at the sleeping baby. Tears filled her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. She gently lifted the newborn from the crib. The baby opened her eyes, but never cried. Lydia carried her through a private hallway, where Vanessa was waiting. Vanessa's hands shook. For one brief second, she almost changed her mind. Then she remembered her own empty life. Her jealousy won. She accepted the baby, wrapped her carefully inside a pink blanket, and disappeared into the darkness. Minutes later, Lydia returned to Grace's room. The doctor followed behind her. His face looked pale. Grace slowly opened her eyes. My baby. Nobody answered. Grace immediately sat up. My baby. Where is she? The doctor removed his glasses. I'm very sorry. There were unexpected complications. We couldn't save her. Grace stared at him, unable to understand. No. No. That's impossible. I held her. I kissed her. She was healthy. The doctor lowered his head. We are sorry. Grace screamed so loudly. Nurses came running into the room. Samoa rushed back moments later. He found his wife crying uncontrollably. My baby. They took my baby. Samoa hugged her tightly. Neither of them noticed that no one ever allowed them to see the baby's body. The hospital quickly claimed the child had already been transferred for emergency procedures before passing away. Everything happened so quickly. No one questioned it. 3 days later, a tiny funeral was held. An empty white coffin was buried beneath a large oak tree. Grace collapsed beside the grave. Part of her soul was buried that day. Meanwhile, nearly 200 miles away, Vanessa introduced the newborn as an orphan she had legally adopted through a private agency. Few people asked questions. Everyone praised her kindness. What a generous woman. What a beautiful thing she's done. Vanessa smiled proudly. Every lie made the next one easier. The little girl grew up believing Vanessa was her mother. She was named Ariana. Unlike Vanessa, Ariana had a gentle heart. She volunteered, helped strangers, worked hard. She never cared about expensive things. Ironically, she inherited every beautiful quality from the mother she had never known. 20 years passed. Grace never had another child. Instead, she founded a small organization that comforted mothers who had lost babies. People admired her strength. But every birthday, she quietly visited the tiny grave, placed fresh white lilies beside it, and whispered, "Happy birthday, my angel. I hope you're smiling somewhere." She never missed a single year. One rainy afternoon, 20-year-old Ariana was cleaning an old storage box in Vanessa's attic. Inside, she discovered a faded pink baby blanket, wrapped around something small. Curious, she unfolded it. A tiny silver bracelet slipped into her hand. She gently wiped away the dust. The engraving was still perfectly visible. "Forever loved." Ariana frowned. She had never seen it before. Something about it felt strangely familiar. At that exact moment, Vanessa walked into the attic. The color drained from her face. She rushed forward. "Where did you find that?" Ariana looked confused. "It was inside this old blanket." Vanessa quickly grabbed the bracelet. "You shouldn't touch old things." But it was too late. For the first time in her life, Ariana noticed fear in the woman she called mother. That night, unable to sleep, she secretly ordered a DNA ancestry test online. She had no idea that one small decision was about to uncover the biggest secret of her entire life. 20 years. For 20 long years, Grace carried flowers to a tiny white grave. Every birthday, every Mother's Day, every Christmas, she whispered the same words. "I love you. I hope you're safe. I hope heaven is kind to you." She never imagined her daughter wasn't in heaven. She was alive, only a few miles away. Meanwhile, Ariana couldn't stop thinking about the silver bracelet. Forever loved. Why had Vanessa looked so frightened? Why had she hidden it? Why had she lied about where it came from? The questions refused to leave her mind. Late one night, she quietly opened her laptop. She ordered a complete DNA ancestry test. If Mom is telling the truth, this will prove it. She mailed the sample the next morning. Then, she waited. Vanessa noticed Ariana becoming distant. "You've been quiet lately. Is something wrong?" Ariana forced a smile. "I'm just tired." But Vanessa knew something had changed. That night, she secretly searched Ariana's bedroom. Inside a drawer, she found the DNA test receipt. The color drained from her face. No. She immediately grabbed her phone. "What do I do?" She called Lydia. The retired nurse answered weakly. "I told you 20 years ago. This secret would never stay buried forever." Vanessa shouted, "You promised nobody would ever know." Lydia began crying. "I promised because I was desperate. But I've lived with this guilt every single day." Vanessa hung up. Her hands shook uncontrollably. For the first time, she realized she could lose everything. A week later, Ariana received an unexpected email. DNA processing completed. Before she could open it, another email arrived. It came from a national charity organization. They had been following Ariana's humanitarian work for years. She had built schools, helped orphan children, raised millions for education. The organization wanted to honor her during a nationally televised charity gala. She happily accepted. Vanessa insisted on attending. "I'm proud of you." Ariana smiled politely. But something still didn't feel right. At the same time, Grace also received an invitation. Her foundation supporting grieving mothers had been selected for a humanitarian award. Samuel smiled. "You deserve this." Grace laughed softly. "I only wish our daughter could have seen it." Samuel gently squeezed her hand. "Maybe somehow. She already does." The night of the gala finally arrived. The grand ballroom sparkled beneath thousands of crystal lights. Business leaders, government officials, doctors, journalists, celebrities. Everyone gathered to celebrate people changing lives. Grace arrived wearing a simple navy blue gown. Samuel proudly walked beside her. Across the ballroom, Ariana entered wearing an elegant silver dress. The audience applauded. Vanessa followed behind her, smiling proudly for every camera. Neither Grace nor Ariana realized they were only a few feet apart. During dinner, Grace looked across the room. Her eyes suddenly froze. Ariana laughed while speaking to another guest. Something felt strangely familiar. The smile, the eyes, the way she tilted her head. Grace whispered, "Samuel. Doesn't she look?" Samuel looked carefully, then slowly nodded. "She reminds me of someone." Grace couldn't explain it. Her heart suddenly raced. Moments later, the host stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, we have one final surprise. Our sponsors have partnered with one of Africa's leading genetic research laboratories. We're launching a national campaign encouraging families to reconnect through DNA." The audience applauded. The host smiled. "And one of tonight's guests agreed to become our first participant." Ariana looked surprised. "I did." The organizer laughed. "You signed the optional consent form with your registration." She remembered. She had completely forgotten. Vanessa immediately stood up. "We are leaving." Ariana looked confused. "Why?" Vanessa forced a smile. "I don't feel well." Before they could move, the laboratory director walked onto the stage. "The analysis has already been completed." Vanessa's knees almost gave way. A giant screen slowly lit up. The laboratory logo appeared. Then, Ariana's DNA profile. The audience watched curiously. The scientist continued. "Our system automatically searches for close biological matches already registered in our humanitarian database." Grace frowned. She had donated DNA years earlier to help identify missing children. The computer continued scanning. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. Then suddenly, a loud notification echoed across the ballroom. Biological match found. The audience became silent. Grace looked toward the screen. Samuel grabbed her hand. Another line appeared. 99.999% parent-child match. The scientist smiled. "It appears our participant has found her biological mother." Everyone leaned forward. The screen slowly revealed the name. Grace Williams. The ballroom exploded into gasps. Grace covered her mouth. "No." Ariana stared at the screen, unable to breathe. Vanessa nearly collapsed. Samuel whispered, "Our daughter." Grace burst into tears. "My baby." The audience watched in complete silence. Ariana slowly turned toward Grace. Their eyes met. For the first time, mother and daughter looked at each other. Neither of them spoke. It felt as though 20 years had disappeared in a single heartbeat. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoed from the back of the ballroom. Please. I can't live with this anymore. Everyone turned. An elderly woman slowly walked forward. It was Lydia, the retired nurse. She was crying uncontrollably. Security escorted her to the stage. She fell to her knees. I did it. I took the baby. The baby never died. I accepted Vanessa's money. I helped her steal Grace's daughter. The ballroom fell completely silent. Journalists immediately raised their cameras. Vanessa screamed, "She's lying." Lydia shook her head. "No. I kept copies." She handed investigators a sealed envelope. Inside were hospital records, night shift logs, payment records, old photographs, even the original newborn identification band, still bearing Grace's name. Police officers standing nearby immediately examined the evidence. Everything matched. One officer looked directly at Vanessa. "Mrs. Johnson, you are under investigation." Vanessa stepped backward. This wasn't supposed to happen. I loved her. Grace looked directly into her eyes. "No. You loved what belonged to someone else." Ariana slowly walked toward Grace. Tears streamed down both of their faces. Grace reached out trembling hands. "I'm so sorry. I searched for you. Every year. I believed you had died." Ariana could barely speak. She slowly embraced Grace. The entire ballroom stood and applauded through tears. Even journalists wiped their eyes. It was one of the most emotional reunions anyone had ever witnessed. But as they hugged, Ariana quietly whispered one heartbreaking question. "If you're really my mother, why didn't you come and find me?" Grace closed her eyes. Because the answer would change Ariana's life forever. The ballroom remained completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Grace and Ariana were still embracing each other after 20 years apart. Both were crying uncontrollably. Then, Ariana gently pulled away. Looking into Grace's tear-filled eyes, she whispered the question that had been breaking her heart. "If you're really my mother, why didn't you come and find me?" Grace closed her eyes. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Samuel stepped closer and gently placed his hand on Ariana's shoulder. "We never stopped looking for you." Ariana looked confused. Grace slowly opened her purse. Inside was an old photograph. It showed a tiny pink nursery, an empty crib, and a smiling pregnant woman. She handed it to Ariana. "I kept everything. The nursery. Your baby clothes. Your first blanket. I couldn't throw any of it away." Ariana stared at the picture. Grace continued softly, "The hospital told us you died. They refused to let us see your body. They told us there had been complications. I begged them. I begged them one last time to let me hold you." Her voice broke. "They said it would only make my pain worse." Samuel wiped tears from his eyes. "I never believed it. I always felt something wasn't right. I hired investigators. We searched hospitals. Checked adoption agencies. We even spoke to the police. But every document said the same thing. Infant deceased." Grace nodded. "Every year, I visited your grave. I celebrated your birthday. I bought birthday presents. And donated them to orphanages. Because I couldn't bear taking them home." Ariana burst into tears again. For 20 years, her real parents had never abandoned her. They had been mourning her, while she had been living only hours away. Grace gently touched Ariana's face. "I never stopped being your mother. Not for a single day." Ariana collapsed into her arms once again. This time, she whispered, I'm sorry. I thought you didn't want me. Grace kissed her forehead. My precious girl. I wanted you every single second. The ballroom erupted into applause. Even journalists lowered their cameras. Some stories were simply too emotional to interrupt. Across the room, Vanessa sat alone. No one stood beside her anymore. Friends quietly walked away. Business partners ignored her. Reporters no longer wanted interviews. They wanted answers. Police investigators approached. Mrs. Vanessa Johnson. You are under arrest for kidnapping, fraud, identity falsification, and conspiracy. The handcuffs clicked around her wrist. Vanessa looked toward Ariana. I raised you. I loved you. Ariana slowly walked over. She looked into Vanessa's eyes. I'll always be grateful that you fed me, clothed me, and educated me. But love doesn't begin with a lie. You stole 20 years from my parents. You stole 20 years from me. Vanessa began crying. I was jealous. I wanted what Grace had. Ariana quietly answered, and because of that, you lost everything. Police gently escorted Vanessa away. She never looked back. Months passed. Grace and Ariana slowly learned how to become mother and daughter. It wasn't easy. They had missed birthdays, school graduations, first heartbreaks. 20 years couldn't be replaced overnight. So they started with small things. Grace taught Ariana family recipes. They baked together every Sunday. Samoa taught Ariana how to repair old furniture. Just like every father teaches his daughter. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes they simply sat together in silence. Healing doesn't happen in one day. But it does happen. One evening, Grace opened an old wooden box. Inside were 20 birthday cards. One for every year Ariana had been gone. Every card had been written on her birthday. Grace smiled sadly. I never stopped writing to you. Ariana opened the first card. Then the second. Then the 10th. Then the 20th. Each one ended with exactly the same sentence. I love you. Wherever you are. Ariana couldn't stop crying. She hugged Grace tightly. No one has ever loved me like this. Grace smiled. I've loved you since before you were born. The court case became national news. The corrupt hospital staff lost their licenses. The hospital publicly apologized. Families from across the country came forward. Many shared similar stories. Grace looked at Ariana. We can't change the past. But maybe we can protect someone else's future. Together, they established the Forever Loved Foundation, named after the tiny silver bracelet. The organization investigated missing newborn cases, provided free DNA testing for families, helped reunite separated children with their biological parents, built safe maternity centers, trained nurses, supported grieving mothers. Within 2 years, hundreds of families were reunited. The bracelet that once represented heartbreak became a symbol of hope across Africa. One sunny afternoon, Grace invited Ariana to the old cemetery. They stood before the tiny white grave. The stone still read, "Beloved baby girl." Ariana quietly knelt. She placed fresh white roses beside it. Then gently touched the cold marble. This grave was never mine. Grace nodded. No. But it held my broken heart. Together, they removed the old headstone. Months later, the cemetery transformed the space into a memorial garden honoring every missing child who had finally been found. On the foundation's 5th anniversary, thousands gathered for a celebration. Children laughed. Families embraced. Music filled the air. Grace stepped onto the stage. She smiled toward Ariana. Then slowly removed the tiny silver bracelet from a velvet box. The same bracelet. The one engraved 20 years earlier. Forever loved. She gently fastened it around Ariana's wrist once again. It finally came home. The audience stood in applause. Ariana looked at the bracelet. Then at Grace. Her voice trembled. For 20 years. She had called another woman Mom. Now. She finally whispered the word her real mother had waited a lifetime to hear. Mom. Grace burst into tears. So, you finally said it. Ariana smiled through tears. I've always had a mother. I just didn't know where she was. They embraced as the crowd applauded. Samuel joined them. For the first time in 20 years. Their family was finally complete. As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, children released hundreds of white balloons into the sky. Grace looked at Ariana. Ariana squeezed her mother's hand. Neither of them wanted to let go. Because after 20 years of darkness, they had finally found each other. And Grace realized something beautiful. No lie. No matter how carefully hidden, can stay buried forever. Because the truth always finds its way home. Final lesson: a stolen child can lose years. But love never forgets. The truth may arrive late. But when it does, it changes every life forever.